I'm going to try to do this in 3 sections if I could. First, I want to give a bunch of thank yous, and then I will talk a little about the book without giving the ending away, killing kind of Gilda kind of takes that away. But then I wanted to read 2 pages about the 3 characters for you to get an idea about how the book or the voice of the book is. So before I do that, I'd like to thank a whole bunch of people. Madison, thank you very much. You're just so quick with your email, so fast to react to everything I ask. Thank you very much. I also want to thank one good lady here, Safura, who began this, trying to get me into this bookstore, and certainly through Sogant. Thank you, Sogant, for introducing me to Marjan. And Andy, thank you. What a great place you have. I've been to many bookstores in the last year. Yours is unique, and unique in a good way, by the way. To have this many authors come through shows so much support in a time when the support for novelists has kind of dwindled. Thank you. I want to thank my cousins, my friends, but more than anything, my publisher, Marian Karinch, who took a real risk on me, mostly because her publishing company is mostly nonfiction. I might be their first fiction, and she's now ready to actually publish my 2nd novel as well, which says something good about her, and maybe not about her judgment. For me, I also, you guys, I don't know if you know, but Norman Thibault from NPR did my book audiobook, so if you want to listen to the audiobook, that's also available. I want to thank someone who will come join us a bit later, Maryam Ayrumlu. She played the PR for me. She was like a mentor, told me how to do all sorts of social media. It's hard to believe that she was insisting that I put something up on social media every day. I said, what? I'm not 18, you know, this is not what I do. But she did press me, and I did put a lot of social media, and it works. It certainly works to work LinkedIn and social media and so forth. So thank you very much to all. So, having said all my thank yous, let me talk to you a little about the book and the background and how it came about. First of all, I had written a novel called 1001, which was a very difficult novel for me to write, and it was quite a, let's say, emotionally draining novel. So I decided, okay, my next novel is going to be a love story. And this is what I think Killing Gilda is about. But where did it come from? I think it came from 2 places. I don't know if you ever seen the movie Gilda with Rita Hayworth. A fantastic movie, you know, for 20 minutes you're watching this, no Rita Hayworth to be seen, but watching Glenn Ford, which probably is the most miscast actor ever, but he was in this movie, and suddenly, after 20 minutes, suddenly Rita Hayworth comes out, and I just fell back and said, my God, what a beautiful woman. And the story is about 3 people, a young ex of Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth is married to a very rich person, and this trio have this story that in the end, obviously Glenn Ford wins the girl. That was one side, and then I also had this thing in my head about the Beauty and the Beast from when I was a kid, and how well that author managed to make that happen. You know, in the end, in fiction, it's what you can get away with, and he gets away with that novel. So somehow I kind of melded these, and I was looking for a subject that kind of fits these 2 themes in them, and by some luck, I was reading something about a lady who became the mistress of the Shah of Iran, and I want to make sure everybody knows that that period was only 3 months, in 1973. And so I thought, oh, this could come out to become a good fictional story. I want to give you a little bit of background of what Iran was like somewhere between, I would say, 1965, 63, after the Khomeini first try at revolution, and he was exiled. After that, to 73, Iran went through a tremendous growth. And for anybody who lived during those years, they saw it. It was really obvious that things were happening. And so I think a philosopher, Dariush Shaygan, said those years were the recreation hour for Iran's history. It was that kind of, that good for all of us who lived there. But somewhere around 73, things started going awry, including the Shah became kind of a different person almost. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And certainly, I don't want to say that if he had died then he would have become a very popular figure, but he would have. He had done enough in those 10 years that seemed to me a kind of a background that made Iran into a modern society. Now we can argue that it was too fast or too slow, etc., etc. But this book kind of happens during that time. It's a time that people were very optimistic. So let me bring up my narrator, who is an ugly man, a beast, who becomes essentially a pimp in the court of Shah of Iran. And there certainly were many. He wasn't the only one, but nevertheless, he takes the central position. And I do take the rule for historical fiction is your characters better not change history. That's the rule. You cannot, and this guy does not. And he is really truly a fictional character. But I think a composite of many things that hopefully is clear to Iranians, but maybe not to Americans. So I start 1965. The chapter starts, Assassins of the Wuzu, the lead. I buried the lead. A bullet near my opening above my ischium, lodged in the obturator membrane, has kept me company for 20,000 lousy nights, since it made its way there on the 10th of April, 1965. Let me not be bashful. The bullet I took up my ass was for my king and not my country. The blooming clover-shaped shell, a frozen smoke ring on the X-ray film, shows 4 spread petals. Each steel petal ensconced itself in the flesh, surrounded by nerve. It made me walk with a slight bend, like I've never finished the last step on the evolutionary ladder. Bullets travel a calculated path. They cause incalculable damage. Take the non-fatal shot two years before mine. It entered the target on the 22nd of November, 1963. The bullet, first from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, whistled through 15 layers of clothing, 7 layers of epithelium, and a foot of muscle tissue. It merrily unknotted its necktie, removed 4 inches of rib, shattered a radius bone, and didn't come to stop until well buried in a thigh. The other bullet, Kennedy's headshot, produced what we recognize as the worldwide tragedy. 18 months later, a different bullet, one among many, was fired by a soldier who ran amok with a machine gun in the Marble Palace to assassinate His Imperial Majesty. It ricocheted from the marble wall in front of the palace to enter my posterior, a local comedy that delighted the courtiers for years. His Majesty worked from his office on the first floor, first door on the left, for the rest of the day. His work ethic, self-evident. In the afternoon, the Shah drove his convertible around the capital for an hour and a half, commented that no one gets assassinated twice a day. People recognized him and clapped with enthusiasm. In 1965, he was popular. In 1066, the well-known Ful Gole warned William the Conqueror from a would-be assassin, and he saw the start of an empire. I took a bullet for my king up the ass and got a jester's seat, the best seat, to watch the fall of the Persian Empire. That is personal comedy. So I just want to make sure, so that's the voice of our narrator, who is in Natick in an old home, reminiscing what's going on and what happened to him. So then the second person, who is obviously the namesake Gilda, and I want to talk a bit about Gilda because there's a funny story there. So I wrote the book, and I was almost finishing putting the ribbon on when I heard my wife walk into the door with the phone on her head saying, "Hey, Gilda is alive?" And the other friend was saying, yeah, I know her. She's living in Tehran. And I thought, oh shit, I just killing Gilda. I mean, what's this about? And it really kind of threw me for a loop. And I thought, oh, this thing is done, and so on and so forth. And then a few days afterwards, I realized, oh, this actually allows me a lot more freedom, because I call her my Gilda and not that Gilda. And I call the show my show and not that show, because to my view, I've noticed that most Iranians have, every Iranian that you'll speak to will have a different theory about the Shah and what happened and so on and so forth. So this is my story, and the story of narrators and fictional people who really are not showing my view of things. So I want to just give you a feel for what Gilda was about. Gilda did exist. She was a general's daughter, and I've kept that pretty straight. But then things go awry for my Gilda, whereas it doesn't for the real Gilda. So this is 2 pages only. In June, ice melts in Paris. That night, I took G to dinner at Brasserie Lippe. For the first time, we talked unencumbered. I talked to her, no lectures, more like a family member. I warned her of the dangers of the slippery slope with an inconstant man like His Imperial Majesty. Sorry about that. I erred when I raised her father's role in the introduction to the Shah. She took me to the shed for hypocrisy. She understood the power of her beauty. She argued if a kid were a math prodigy, you wouldn't criticize his father for placing him in the elite school. Her beauty had disfigured her. She gave me a bitter smile. Look around you. There are 5 tables within a few steps. The table on the periphery of your right has a husband and wife. The man has his back to us. Watch him use little discreet gestures. He drops his napkin while he steals a glance at me. She waited patiently. The man leaned back to ask for the check, and at the same time stole a glance at G. Now look at the table of 4 behind me to my left, she said. You have a perfect view. 4 businessmen, Lebanese if I'm not mistaken. They are shameless. They talked about me from the minute we sat down. Look at them. I had noticed the table. I had also shamelessly enjoyed their envy. Now look to my right. We both looked at the table to 2. A French elderly couple, clearly wealthy, enjoyed the meal as the French do. They saw us turn. The woman and man lifted their wine glasses towards us. Had I sat there alone, no one would have drank to my health. Against the wall behind you is a table for 8. I could see them in the mirror on the opposite wall. It had 4 couples of different ages. They talked and laughed loudly, oblivious to any other table. I protested. She smiled with her lips, but the eyes were joyless. Pick one of the couples and observe them. The men know their wives know of my presence. It isn't an ego thing. The men will not glance over unless the wives get involved in a serious conversation. Sure enough, she nailed it. The 5th table behind you, I considered safe territory. A mother with her 2 children, a boy and a girl. My, she observed, the French allow their kids out late at night. You must understand, I've lived this way since I was 13. I knew after the first minute we sat down all you observed. I am the math prodigy, you see. She made a wry smile. She understood the torch of her beauty. She carried it erect into any room she entered. The monotony of her beauty imposed a dictatorial hold in the company of others. Furious at her beauty, She used to get ahead, and nothing wrong with that, she said. So Gilda, in at least my Gilda, I call her a victim, and certainly in the book, she's very manipulative, but why is she manipulative is because of the atmosphere. And now I have bear with me, I have two little pieces that I want to talk about the Shah, because there is where people have a lot of ideas about, and again, this is not me. So, 1965, we slide up the slippery slope with fair winds at our back. And this is the narrator talking about his time at court. You may be wondering, how does a young man of good family with land and money to spare turns into an errant pimp? How did James Hamilton, 2nd Duke of Abercorn, become the king's asswiper, the groom of the stool? Proximity to power smells like flowers, even if you're wiping or licking an ass. I recall my self-importance and the vitality it offered. I don't need to give my job a sheen of respectability. I don't recall a moral slippery slope. I saw a metaphorical escalator we stepped on, and it, with hydraulic smoothness, took us up and up. An escalator with rails like a zipper closed behind us. We never looked for or wanted an exit or an off-ramp. There was nothing to question. We served the royally to the best of our abilities. The difference between a king and a dictator, my uncle, the court minister, this is Mr. Alam, would say, is that the king and the country are the same size of a coin. God appoints a king, the dictator appoints a dictator. I add that kings have no choice. They suffer compulsory pre-birth impressment. Kings are disappointed sons. Their fathers, by definition, can never witness their feats. Today, a monarchist might look foolish, but not then. We never doubted his legitimacy. His father had won the crown. You buy in or you don't. It was just a style of government, a transition not to be messed with. The Shah, His Imperial Majesty, developed late, a slow progression. You can't pinpoint how he accumulated so much power. The courtiers had a markedly different lens from our fathers. In the second half of the 20th century, the West went through its whirlpool of cultural revolution none of us could escape. The West educated us. Those in power attended colleges and high schools in the US, France, Switzerland, and England. We fought the battle of westernization without apologies. At court, we lived the Western style. We didn't live the life of a Muslim because nobody brought us up as Muslims. Simple stuff. The truth about our generation. Our grandfathers prayed daily. Our fathers pretended to pray. We didn't even know the words. And you know what? It felt better. Much, much better. I'm always irritable on Mondays. I write a few paragraphs with my razor-thin pilot pen. I reread them. Today, 44 years after the dynasty's fall, I blame His Majesty. Not for all the silly interviews he gave us in the late 70s. Not for spending an enormous amount on military hardware. Not for his rash, large projects that turned into the economy inflationary. I don't blame His Majesty for Savak's overreach in the 70s. The war was real, but the mission was wrong-headed as the actions of the CIA, MI6, or the French security forces. I don't even blame him for his bouquet of court sycophants, of which I am a poster child. He who let the mullahs of Qom develop into the dragons of today needs to carry the responsibility. Early in his reign, the Shah led the mullahs back from Iraq, where his father had exiled them. Our young king was the Trojan horse who brought them back amidst us. He believed superstitiously, all beliefs are superstitious. He believed Abbas, a Muslim saint, had once broken his fall from a horse. The saint had placed his hand between his head and the stone. During a walk in the royal palace, he believed he saw a vision of the Imam Zaman. The Redeemer passed him by, weighed by his saintly halo. He believed Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law, sat in his heels on the floor and offered him a liquid to drink. It cured his typhoid. Of all of us, I count His Majesty as the naive one. We understood the stakes. We, the irreligious, fought a lifestyle war against the religious. I never fooled myself. I never thought my actions didn't have unfair consequences. I never pretended to twist unfairness into fairness. We pushed all the chips into the middle of the table. We played enthusiastically. Les jeux sont faits, rien ne va plus, cried the croupier in 1941. These are the dangers of a Monday morning. So, I have this where the narrator is kind of in this old home and reflecting and putting some blame on the Shah, and certainly on the Shah in his later stages. And then there is a section in the book at the end which I actually call an epilogue, but that really it's a, I think I left my, right, there it is, I think. I'm afraid I left my, it's there, yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe I've left it, but I'll give you a quick précis of what the epilogue says. The epilogue is about the Shah before 1965. And the epilogue is about what he went through his early years. And I put a lot of emphasis on his early years because he was humiliated. So now I come to the point where I talk a bit about the novel. Every good novel, in my opinion, hopefully it's a good novel, every good novel has usually an emotion that people or the writer hangs on to. It could be love, it could be hate, but really it centers about an emotion that a novel takes it. In my case, it's about humiliation. And the humiliation is not just about the Gilda, it's not about the narrator who's a pimp, but it's also about the Shah, who was highly humiliated the first 20 years of his life. And I can go through it one by one to say that first they threw out his father and family out and exiled them by the English and Russian. Then he was assassinated twice, bullets that went through his face. His car was bombed twice, once in Berlin, once in Iran. He had a big plane accident where his plane did a flip. He went through one hell of a 20 years. His prime ministers all backstabbed him. The kings were running out in Iraq, in Afghanistan. So he was under tremendous pressure until 1965. And in fact, we can talk about, and you can ask about the issue of Salvag, but Salvag wasn't around till 1960. That's when it started. So, and he became king in 41, sorry. And so there was a 20 years where if anybody who'd gone through what he did, he would be in some psychotherapy and with PTSD. It was not a joke. So when he does suddenly, at 65, life suddenly changes so drastically, and the oil money, and he becomes so powerful. You can see that in his own mind, he thinks he's it. And what you get, I think, between 73 and 79 is a man who had become an autodidact because there was no one who taught him. He read everything, by the way, meaning everything that came in his way he read, made decisions on the smallest thing. But at some point he stopped taking any advice. So sometime in 1975, when there was a big inflationary economy, he took everybody to the north in the Caspian Sea, all the economists, and he asked them, okay, what do you think? And everybody to a word said, hey, we got to stop. We got to stop this fast growth. And his answer after 3 days was, have you not read my book? You should know that we're going forward. And so, I'm kind of soft on him because I find him a much more complex man than, let's say, dictators like Saddam Hussein or someone like that, who was a very black and white thing. He was a very complex man. He was brave when bullets were showered on him, but he was also very cowardly when there was a danger to his system. So I'm interested to hear your comments at this point, but the book kind of is ensconced during those times. Open to questions. Thank you.
Now we'll have time for questions. You can just raise your hand. I'll come pass you the mic. Thanks for starting us off.
Thank you. Can you talk about your process of writing? I mean, if I understand, you did something else for life, and then you kind of switched to writing. So, how long did it take you to write this from the minute that you thought about this book? Just that whole creative process, can you explain that? Sure,
yeah. First of all, my background is, for 40 years I worked in the industrial world, in semiconductors. But from very early, I wanted to write. So I did my MFA at UNH when I was maybe 26, 27. So all through, I didn't have much time, but I wrote short stories, and I wrote this other book, which took me years and years and years. And then finally, I managed to retire. And nothing better. Just anybody who wants to retire, the water is warm, come. But that allowed me to work 8 hours a day on writing. And the way I do that, because it's historical fiction, I read a great deal. And one of the things, like, I read the daily newspaper Etelat from 1965 to 1975. And most of it was kind of rubbish, but what was interesting, for example, for that reading, is you really get a great sense of what's happening to that country just through the ads. The ads of 1965 are vastly different to the ads of 1975. It's a sexual revolution that cannot be explained in an Islamic country in 10 years. In fact, the only movie that they banned and they didn't allow was Last Tango in Paris. Otherwise, everything was kind of pretty. So I read everything. And then once you read a great deal of the history and you start writing, it comes through. But it doesn't come through like I write a piece and I don't know where it fits. And then I write another piece, I don't know where it fits. And then somehow one morning you get up and those two pieces fit somehow. And people ask me if I know the ending. I never know the ending of any novel. And I think most writers would say the same. They don't have an outline, they don't write with an outline. But somehow it melts together and it works. But yeah, reading a great deal about the era was really the way it opens up, and you start writing things and then you read it and think, oh, I got it right here because I read something else. So it's a very iterative process, but it took me 2.5 years to do this one. I remember when I was doing my MFA, the 3 professors I had averaged, they said, 1 book every 5 years, and they wrote every day. So I suspect somewhere between 2 and 5 is what takes people to write let's call it a serious book,
I also have another comment. Even though your book was fiction, I really didn't feel I'm reading a fiction, because I think you've done tremendous amount of research, because a lot of it just seemed true to me as a reader. I just, because I could relate some parts of it to other books that I have read about that period. And so I just wanted you to know, for me, it was real, even though it's a fiction.
Thank you so much.
I just felt like I saw the characters, it was like a film, I read it in 4 or 5 days. It was very
There's no
interesting.
better compliment you can give a writer.
So it shows that you've researched a lot.
The piece that gets people is that epilogue still a fictional thing. And my daughter kept saying, "You know this guy because you said it." I said, "No, it's fiction." It's like I couldn't convince her that that's also fiction. But what happened to me there, by the way, is I wrote this book and then I realized I put too much history into it. It got a feel for too much nonfiction. So I took all that and put it in an epilogue so that mostly American readers would get a feel for the time and so on and so forth. But by the way, I was wondering I don't know if you've read it as you haven't read it yet, but the Americans have a completely different view of the book. They see it more fiction than Iranians do. So it's a kind of a different kind of a feel. Go ahead.
You talk about the complexities of the Shah, and I wonder how much in writing the book you discovered or resolved some of your own feelings about the Shah and the passing of this time that you grew up in.
Yeah, so that is a funny thing you say. When you read all this stuff, I mean, if you had asked me this a year and a half ago, I would have definitely a very crisp opinion. But as you kind of start forgetting it, you kind of fall into 2 or 3 kind of cliches of how you thought about him. But I would say that the life that we led had him in the background so much, like not just me. I mean, I'm saying Iranians. That there was not a day you would open a newspaper and there wouldn't be something about him. So as a kind of a background, he was there all the time. Right? And so it's very hard to separate yourself and have a very kind of, let's say, non-judgmental view. But I did get that for a while, and I thought that he was a complex man, and certainly not the evil that people make him out to be, or the God that would have saved Iran forever, So I personally don't believe at all in royal, essentially monarchy. So that makes me judgmental automatically about it. So.
I was wondering if you could give us a few more tips about writing historical fiction. You did say that the number 1 rule is that your characters can't change history. So as you traverse this, how do you do it? I would be afraid. I would want to make sure that all the history was right. And I wouldn't want to dip into the fiction. So how do you go there? And what are the other things you keep in mind as you traverse this?
I'm writing a non-fiction book about writing right now as we speak. But I would tell you that if you talk to all writers, there's one tip that is just not negotiable. You sit in the morning at your desk and you spend 8 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, but you don't go looking on the internet. You don't go, and it's shocking. I get up some mornings and think I have nothing to say. And you stand a little bit and then you kind of doodle a bit and then suddenly, there's a paragraph. And is the next paragraph. And then the second thing I would tell you, and I was telling my friend Greg there, is when I was writing while working, I didn't dare throw away anything because I didn't have the time. I said, geez, I've written this. This is absolutely crucial. Like once I retired and started writing, you become much more judgmental about, hey, this is shit, I'm going to throw it out. This is bad, I'm going to throw it out. And that probably is the most important thing, because you wait 2 days, 3 days, you go back and say, how did I write that? Whereas before I wouldn't even read it, I would just, this is important, I've got to keep it. So those 2 things is the discipline of staying at it and being able to throw away what your gut tells you very quickly that this is not good, it just doesn't work, and you throw it away. And then I would also tell you, don't use your family to judge you. They see you in there somehow, and they, no, it's not that way. You know, it's like.
Okay.
Thank you. So my understanding is that there were other mistresses as well. What made Gilda special for you? What made her stand out?
Oh, it's a good question, actually. First of all, actually, that's a good segue, because, first of all, I'm not exaggerating, it's in the book, but at some point, so many people were bringing women to the Shah that he said, we need to centralize it. This is just, so he wasn't a mistress type of a guy. He essentially brought, I use the right word, sex workers from Madame Claude from Paris, and they came in droves. And by the way, I'm certainly not judgmental that way. It's between him and his wife. I mean, I do know that there was never a complaint of him, the modern, of forcing himself or anything like that. Most of his mistresses, or I don't call them mistresses, they were there for the money. And he would not only pay them, also give them presents and so on. And there are many Madame Claude women who have said that he was generous. And Madame Claude saw the people who work for Madame Claude, she saw them as Goldman Sachs people, like mass mistresses of the universe. And they were. So many of those women married very high-ended people, and etc. But I think 60s and 70s, a little like, I don't know if you've seen the series Mad Men, but it had that kind of they permitted themselves that kind of lifestyle, as Kennedy did, who had an apartment and also saw women that way. But I never, in none of my readings, I got ever a feeling of somebody saying we were forced, or it was usually two sides agreed to it. Now the mistress piece is rare. He had mistresses in the 1950s, but that was fair enough between his second wife and third wife. So there were mistresses then, so there are names of people that you can read about. But not many actually mistresses. People did bring daughters to introduce to him, etc., but I think most of his philandering, as we call it, was with professionals. My next book. Thank you. What a great segue. The next book is, I don't know how to put it. It's called 1001, 9 Nights of Dreams, and it's very much on the. So I'm going to get a bit geeky, but 1001, as in the story of 1001, is my kind of base. But in binary numbers, 1001 is 9 nights. Because in our modern world, we don't have that much time, 1001 nights. So it's 9 nights of, it's about a family from 1905, first revolution, to 1979, second revolution, 3 generations, grandfather, son's daughter, 2 sons, and it's pretty gruesome at points. But it's very again, it's very historical. Probably it's, for me, it's my book. I lived with it for years, and it's a book that is also pretty accurate historically, but it brings to the American audience what the first revolution was about, and how it faded and died, and how it came to 79, but through a storytelling method. And that should be out May 15th. This May, yeah. Yeah. I have time now.
Any last questions? Okay, no worries.
In both your new book and in Killing Gilda, what understanding or truths or your experiences would you want the American audience to understand or grapple with?
Oh, I'll go back to my emotional piece, humility. I'm sorry, humiliation. In this sense that our country, historically, for the past 100 years, has seen a lot of humiliation, including, as I said, the Shah and all the characters and so on. But humiliation needs to be understood, which neither the US or the West ever took time to understand. The fact that they always came into the country and did things, humiliated us, I think is a theme for me. And I think it's a theme that I want to say to people, we need to forget it. We got to stop complaining about it and look forward to stand on our own feet and do our thing. And so if you kind of talk to Iranians, we don't trust the English, we don't trust Americans because of all the, let's call it, I would say definitely crimes against the governments, what happened to us. But I think we need to stop that. We need to say, okay, it's happened. It's like me complaining about my mother doing something when I was 10. Enough, you got to live your life. And I think we're in that same place, and my guess is we're going to see more of it, not less of it in the next year or two. But if that's what I wanted to get a feel to say, hey, we need to be more optimistic about how we look at ourselves and look at ourselves in the mirror and say, hey, we need to get on with that. That is a good question. That's the lesson I would have wanted to impart.
I think with that, let's give it up one more
Thank you.
time.
I really want to thank you. Thank you very much.
I also wanted to thank you. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Yahya, for this amazing conversation, coming to our stage. I did want to ask you, would you want to come back to Busboys as a final question? Because we would love to have you back.
I would, once the book is out, I'll come prostrate myself and ask for it.
Okay, awesome. And then I just want to remind you all that Killing Gilda is here, available for purchase. We know you can get it anywhere, but if you are going to get it, we encourage you to get it here with us today. Amazon, those other places, billionaires don't need more money. We know this. It really makes a difference when you purchase local. And we hope you have a great rest of your night. Thank you.
Thank you.